Time did not begin with an explosion as many theories, books, and scholars might have you believe. Rather, the universe began slowly and drowsily, like a child waking from dreams. There was no darkness, because darkness had not yet been created. Instead, at the center of absence, a small bluish light peeled itself from the corner of nothing. It lifted, swayed, and grew over the course of several millennia. And as its light spilled out, it created objects for its light to illuminate. And this is how the universe was created, gently and rather quietly. Sun was created first, and he shone so brilliantly that everything was enveloped in his thick, amber luminescence. Moon was quickly created next, to give Sun balance. She pulled quiet darkness around her like smoke and silk, while Sun preferred to spew out his presence in powerful bursts. Sun loved Moon because she made him seem all that much brighter and stronger against her darkness. And Moon loved Sun because he gave her warmth and light, and allowed her to keep a quiet, dark space behind her. Sun and Moon lived for ages, and surprisingly never got lonely, because they had each other and because loneliness did not yet exist. Sun spent his days living up to the blue light that gave him life, and he raced about the universe lighting up every corner and crevice he could. He stood for wisdom because he had so faithfully discovered, and continued to discover, everything that existed around him. And he stood for power too, because he alone brought light and fire, and pushed back the nothing into something. Moon spent her nights waiting in the sky. After Sun was exhausted and could no longer rampage about, she cradled her dark robes around the universe and lulled it quietly to sleep. She loved her quiet world, and watched it adoringly as it slept and grew. She noticed every small aspect of the life around her, and she became intuition and care, because she knew immediately when anything had gone wrong. She loved that her son was so good at creating, and she loved the acclaims he trumpeted to her at each dusk. But as he slept, Moon grew concerned, for the love she felt for the universe had blossomed, and she felt it growing already among the dark areas Sun did not know, which she hid in the blackest side of her. She feared what would happen if she created something herself, and whether or not Sun could love this discovery as much as his own. She was frightened and anxious because at the same time she wanted to expose her small planet the Sun and fill it with his rays, but she also wanted to keep it quiet and still inside her darkness. So, in her fear, Moon hid her daughter, Earth. She held Earth in a permanent eclipse, and as Earth grew, she learned to wait quietly for the stories her mother would whisper to her each night, and saw only the faintest rings of her father illuminate the edges of her mother's form. As Earth grew, Moon noticed that she had many of the qualities of her father in her, and her daughter was growing, night by night, more inquisitive and more adventurous. Earth asked her mother one night why Moon hid her from her father. Earth's voice was deep and cool, and blew with the wind through the trees that had already begun to trickle down her face. Moon smiled at her daughter and breathed in a whisper. Your father creates. He has poured his light into everything you see around you, but he did not create you, you who were born among my shadows. And were he to see you now, more developed than any of his creations, he would not be pleased. Earth wrinkled her brow with the thought of this, and peeled her eyes upward in thought. Moon smiled and gently traced a finger down her child's face, spinning up hills and valleys and painting the fields of Earth yellow, orange, and green. Do not worry so, child, Moon said. One day you will meet your father, and his rays will warm your valleys and green your hills. But this day does not come now, and when it comes, it will not come easily. Moon's face grew dim, for she could already hear her son bustling home to tell her of his recent conquests and creations. Moon's face scared young Earth, who had noticed that just as she herself grew each day, so did her mother's sorrow. And Moon found herself both proud of her daughter, whose size now nearly eclipsed Moon, and anxious at the knowledge that her dark secret would not be secret for much longer. If time had measure, which it yet did not, then a month passed before Sun came home to find his wife curled around something dark and whispering softly. Sun smiled and ran toward Moon, who spun around in surprise, for she had not heard him coming, for his Moon had often surprised him in the past by arranging the stars for him into crabs, saucers, and other things which would not themselves exist for a long time. Sun, smiled Moon, remaining as calm as she could under the circumstances. Tell me all of what you have created today, in great detail. Have you finished aligning the rocks and belts among the darkness? Sun smiled, and attempted unsuccessfully to lean on Moon's edge for a glimpse of what lay beneath. What is it you have back there, sweet Moon? I have never had much patience for presents. As Sun and Moon moved about, Earth closed her eyes and smiled widely. Her father's warmth peered out from the sides of her mother and fell on Earth's edges. It made her feel alive and urgent. Caught in the moment, Earth leaned slightly out from her mother's shadow, to get only a glimpse of her father, whom she had never seen. Sun, who was teasing the Moon and laughing, saw then something incredible. He saw an eye, large and thick, poke out from behind Moon's curve, then quickly widened in shock and retreat. Sun's smile dimmed, and he grew a deep black red. His flames thrashed so violently they singed Moon, who pressed against Sun to protect her Earth. "What is that?" demanded Sun. "That is not a thing of my creation. It is not of me, and yet it lives in the link. What is that?" Moon attempted to calm her son, but he brushed poor Moon aside. Earth stood shaking as the dark shelter of her mother became engulfed in the raging heat of Sun. She felt everything on her body, every plant and rock quiver and boil under the heat, under the leer of her father. He stared at his daughter, whom he did not know for quite a long time before finally addressing her. "You," he said slowly, "are something else." He lifted his lip and lowered his brow in thought. Sun circled Earth, examining all of her valleys and mountains with a critical eye. He turned to his wife, who lay weak at the edge of Sun's light. "This was made by you?" he asked. Moon looked up weakly and gave as strong a nod as she could muster under the circumstances. "This thing, it breathes, it moves, it leers, it spies." With each assertion, Sun crept closer upon the Moon. Earth bit her lip, then called out to Sun in a voice almost as powerful as his. "I am not a thing," cried Earth. Sun turned slowly and looked upon Earth, who puffed and loomed before him as omnisciently as possible. "My name is Earth, and you are my father, as Moon is my mother. I was created from your warmth and her caress, and I will not be referred to as anything less." Sun approached Earth, so close that she squirmed under his heat, but Earth did not move. She tried her best to look assertive under her father's displeased leer. He admired her bravery, this small planet, and after a few moments, Sun could no longer hold back the smile that was creeping to his lips. Moon, sensing Sun's approval of their daughter, regained herself and crept toward the two. And for the first time in all of history, Earth felt the full light of her father Sun and the full darkness of her mother Moon upon her at once. It was a thing of beauty, of swirled dark and light skies, with trees painted ribbons of bright and shadowed greens, her valleys striped and swirled in day and night. But as much as Sun approved of his new daughter, he could ultimately never forgive his Moon for deceiving him. He began to distance himself from Moon, and what affections he had reserved for her for so long, he now gave to his daughter, until eventually he never saw Moon at all anymore, and the constant shifting of Sun and Moon created the cycle of night and day, and brought Earth much sorrow. Perhaps it wasn't just the shifting that made Earth sad, but the fact that her parents were now competing over her. When Earth saw Moon, she would give her dozens upon dozens of stones, diamonds and gems to gaze at, while Sun would show her the universe and give her toys and dolls to play with. They never seemed to understand that she loved them both the same, and that she didn't want to choose. One day, while Sun was ignoring Earth, as usual, letting her play with her dolls, he was saddened to find her crying by herself. Sun wasn't sure what to do or how to approach his daughter, but in his awkwardness he remembered a present he had for her. Reaching into his pocket, he grinned and gave Earth powerful creatures in the shapes of animals that he had made. He told Earth that these creatures would rule her land, settle disputes, stop wars, and bring fertility to her trees and plants. In short, these creatures, which he called gods, would solve all of her problems. Earth looked skeptically at these gods, not believing that they were the cure she needed. But the gods did put a stop to her sadness, and both Earth and the creatures on her lived for a long time in a state of bliss. The magic of the gods made the rivers flow cool and strong, and made her trees grow strong and fruitful. The magic also made the animals tame and calm, but perhaps this magic was just too perfect to last. After many years, the magic simply became less potent and difficult to perform, and the gods' duties became harder and harder. The gods stuck in there as much as they could, but the trees became less fruitful, and the summers less warm. The gods and Sun had a meeting about the declining harvest, the expanding wastelands, and the growing cold winds. With all the evidence, it was soon very obvious that their golden age had passed. Most of the gods took this as a sign that they should leave and retire, while a few decided to stay on Earth and help as much as possible for the entirety of their immortal existence. The departure of some of the gods made Sun very sad, but he could not force them to stay. In time, Bear, Eagle, along with Fox, Lion, and many others, took a chunk out of the Earth and separated it from the rest, creating a great floating paradise for themselves. Although a few gods, such as Turtle, Snake, and Duck, stood by the Earth creatures as Sun had wished them, there were too few of them to do much of anything but watch as Earth changed from a beautiful summer garden into a frigid, unfriendly winter wasteland. Earth, it seemed, had been so used to the gods giving her happiness that she had become unable to make herself happy through other means, and the few remaining gods were not up to the task of dealing with all of the evil creatures that were appearing from every shadow and behind every rock. Moon and Sun were too old and weak to help their daughter, although both felt very sad and partly responsible for her isolation. So they watched their daughter, comforted each other, knowing full well that if their daughter was not helped, things would only get worse. Sun and Moon gathered up all of their hope and prayed that help would come. And one day help did come. From beyond the light and darkness, a stork carrying 2 baby owls appeared, and he flew to Earth.